Right. Hello, everyone. So this is the next part of our Blueprint for Resilience series with the ATCM Advisory Council. So the next part of our journey, this process, is to now start looking at all of those issues we've identified so far, which are around 55, 56 issues. And we're going to go through them one by one and just identify whether we think it's an opportunity or a threat. So I've got another couple of great industry leaders with me today who are going to help me on the process. So Stefan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello to everyone. I'm Stefan Gurney. I'm the Executive Director of the Norwich BID. I'm also Chair of the ATCM Advisory Council and Vice Chair of the BID Foundation.
Fantastic. And Maria, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Maria Manion. I'm the Chief Exec of Watford BID, and I'm also on the British BID's advisory board as well. So,
fantastic. Thanks, guys. So we're going to kick off with the issues. We're going to start with economy. So what I'm going to do, and I've had plenty of issues with this before, but let's see if we get it right for once. I'm going to try to share my screen. So bear with me 1 second.
We'll fill in for you, Ojay, while you're
yeah.
For the sake of the listeners that need to fill the dead air space while you excitingly share the space,
yeah,
Maria and I will cover for you.
Yeah, you can start off with a song then.
Yeah, exactly. Here we go. Thank goodness for that. Ojay's managed to save us from that by finally sharing his screen.
Saved by the bell.
Yeah.
Right. So, Blueprint for Resilience, opportunities and threats. Here we go. So, actually, what we start with is the political things we came up with. Actually, in our first advisory council meeting. So, guys, can you tell me, firstly, starting off with a fast-changing political landscape, opportunity, threat, both or neither? So what do you think about a fast-changing political landscape?
Well, for me, it feels that it's both. There's a danger that it's by changing too fast, you can end up losing any cohesion or any sort of follow through or sort of continuation of thought processes. But it also means that the opportunity is that we can therefore work with that changing political landscape and therefore hopefully be able to inform and sort of set the guidelines and the boundaries for what we're looking at within that. So I feel that's a both for me.
Yeah, Maria, what do you think?
Again, probably both, because I think a lot of people are looking for some stability. But I think also at the same time, there's a recognition that change is required, and this is a changing circumstances. So I think there's a challenge there as well, but it's also how people adapt to that. So I think there's sort of people looking for a bit of both. I think it's actually how you actually balance that. So there's both the threat and the opportunity. And some people are going to be more cautious or more reluctant to adopt change as well. So I think that's, both threat and opportunity.
Okay, brilliant. Moving on to political uncertainty. Opportunity, threat, both, neither.
I think for me, the political uncertainty is a threat more than an opportunity. Yeah, I think everyone needs at the moment as much clarity and everything. I sort of go back to the issues that we had, sort of Brexit, which feels a long time ago and a million issues ago. But the uncertainty of it was what caused such issues. And I think this again will create a challenge and a problem with trying to create resolution to this issue. I think that's a definite threat.
I would agree with that. Political uncertainty, I think, is one of the things that economically could stifle any growth as well. I think that's a serious issue.
Yeah, cool. Agreed. And I think we have to acknowledge as well that the level of political uncertainty might be very different across ATCM's network. So, for example, in both Ireland and Northern Ireland, I'm not sure neither have actually administrations really fully in place yet, due to various issues both sides of the border. So that makes it particularly difficult for them. So next, and this is a big challenge, and we certainly discussed this on both sides of the Atlantic, that choice politicians have to make between health and economy, and whether it is necessarily a choice between the two, or actually the success of both are actually quite closely aligned. What do you think about this playoff between health and economy, opportunity or threat? I think I have a feeling which way this is going.
I think they're intrinsically interlinked. If people aren't healthy, how can you thrive and how can you have a vibrant economy? An example is a business can't open if its staff are sick. So one, you don't have the spend, you don't have the ability of the business to thrive, you don't have the consumers coming in, but also then you have the consumer lack of confidence over whether or not, somewhere is safe or not. So the two are intrinsically linked. You need a healthy environment to have a healthy economy. That's my personal view. I mean, we have got businesses locally which aren't open, which are national businesses, because the staff are sick. So that company isn't operating in our area because of sick people. So it's not got any income coming in. There's people thinking, oh, all the staff are sick. So that's another sort of a thing. But yeah, it's about the confidence as well in the economy. So both have to be healthy.
Yeah. What do you think, Stefan? I mean, I'm getting the feeling maybe this isn't so much both an opportunity or threat. It's neither, but it is an important statement that politicians do have this careful tightrope to sort of walk along here, and ultimately some might be getting it wrong because some are saying this is health versus economy when really it's both together.
Yeah, I think they're interlinked. You can't have one without the other, and I think there's the danger of playing them off against each other to political means. So that's what sort of worries me. If you pitch health versus economy, you get to that sort of rationale, especially internationally. You can see a lot of the rhetoric from America talking about the need to open the economy, and that's at the risk of health. I think that's a dangerous game because it almost paints the business community as an evil, potentially, where they're the ones that are driving the risk, and they're the ones who are trying to work. And you've got, from the business perspective, you've got people whose mental health and physical health are being impacted because of their businesses not being able to open or to create a living, and you can't extricate the two. So I don't think it fits into. I don't think it fits into neither, but I think it's an overarching umbrella sort of approach where this is where we have to get the balance right. So for me, it's not an opportunity or a threat. It's the sort of baseline.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think actually is the way I should actually term it, because I think there is one way you put it down as a threat, is the way I actually term it, considering what you both said, is that it's the perception that it's health versus economy is the bit which is a threat, because ultimately, unless there is that understanding politically that the two are perfectly aligned, it could really do some serious damage to us economically if we get it wrong.
I think it could end up doing both, or if we push too far for the economy, then there's a real impact on the health of the nation, which then ends up coming back again to the other side. If you open up business too early in trading and it has an impact on the health, then it ends up being negative for the economy itself. So yeah, I think saying it's the perception of one versus the other is probably a reasonable way. It's more the perception of it, and to make sure that from a political perspective, they don't try and play one off against the other.
Yeah, I think that's a fair call.
Yeah.
I think so. One thing we noted actually in our first discussion was that we're seeing a lot of collaboration at all levels, politically, with local authorities, working with partners, some cross-party support on various issues. I think I know which one this is: opportunity or threat.
I think it's a huge opportunity for local communities, particularly, and for the economy, and also on a national and regional level. I think it's one way of actually breaking down some of the national barriers as well.
I think for me, this is the classic bit of going, this should in no way be about political colour. This is if ever there was the most obvious rationale for cross-party working, this is it. This is the way where we should be looking almost at what are the opportunities that come out of this for making some things not under like a party or 5-year terms. There should be things that are removed from the sort of governmental terms and the one party ethical processes. These are the things that should have a 20-year collaborative process, that it doesn't matter who's voted in or out. The direction of travel is set for the whole country and all of the parties agree to it. And therefore, it's beyond that. This sort of national pandemic should not be party political. And there's right to hold the government to account for its actions, and right that the government leads. But I think from all levels, from the political at the sort of city, county, regional, mayoral, London sort of government, England, Scotland, Wales, all of these should be working collaborative. And if there's any friction or any sort of where that they're not working together, that's where they should be held to account.
Yeah, agreed.
I think there's potentially a threat where it becomes almost like a political battle, particularly at a national level. So I think one of the threats, but at a more local level, I think we are seeing political collaboration in the majority of areas where. So I think there's sort of it almost is operating at two different levels. So you have the sort of the national, because the national picture and the national view where it's very much seen as the Conservative government dealing with this here and now. There isn't that much of a feeling of an integration of parties working together. Whereas at local level, I think you tend to get the MPs, the mayors, etc., working together with the local authorities. So I think it's slightly different at different levels. And I think that's where one of the threats may be that doesn't translate upwards as well. So some of that collaboration doesn't go up. It just sort of stagnates down at the local and regional level.
Okay, I think that's an important clarification. So I'm going to change this so it's an opportunity, but mainly at a local level, where we're probably able to get a lot more stuff done because of that collaboration. But are we saying probably more likely business as usual when it comes to national politics?
I think we should be pushing for challenge, Ojay. Yeah. We should be the ones leading that challenge to central government, going, why are you not cross-party working? If ever this was a rationale for doing it, if you are not doing it, then you are failing your constituents, you're failing the country.
You know what? I think that's absolutely right. So what I'm going to do, so we can take that into account for phase 3 when we actually look at actionable strategies for ATCM and others, is let's say political friction.
I think one of the opportunities at the moment as well, Ojay, is that actually there's a new Labour leader, and that's one of the new opportunities. And I think that does present itself with opportunities, because it's almost like a clean brush coming in, but a very different style of leadership. And also, I think a leadership that's, got greater clarity than the previous Labour leadership, and also more depth to it. And I think is seen as having a stronger presence as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's an opportunity But it also means, well, where does the Lib Dems, where does the Green Party, etc., all the other parties that might be sitting there, which are going to have in a longer term, this is obviously going to impact, because it's not going to go away, in 5 months, 6 months, 12 months. It will be here for the long term. And if it's not necessarily COVID-19, it might be something else. But the economic impact and the social impact of this is going to be felt for the next 5-10 years. So, there is a need. So there's both, there is an opportunity, but I think there is a threat that it might be stifled by the existing government. It's, it's how people want to hold on to power, isn't it?
Absolutely. And then obviously, while COVID-19 rumbles on, there are issues in the background like Brexit, climate emergency, leveling up across the country, some pretty weighty big political issues which aren't getting the attention they deserve. Opportunity or threat?
I think for me, it's that element of it. It's a threat on the basis that we've had probably at least 3 to 4 years prior to that, prior to this pandemic, of being a one issue like sort of process, which has then meant that loads of the other political issues have been sidelined for at least 4 years, and this will again become the main focus, as it should. But then what will happen is other things again will be sidelined, and we're coming to the thing where we could almost have 10 years where no issues that are not major issues are being dealt with, and you sort of look at things like business rate review and all the rest of it in relation to the economics that we were talking about versus health and all those sorts of things. If nothing else continues and we are solely focused in on one major issue, then there's a real danger that the country cannot function and misses huge opportunities or huge things that need to be resolved going forward.
That is a really good point, and thinking about the timescales and the issues we've had over the past few years. So obviously 2007, 2008, the financial world pretty much collapsed. So we've been focused almost entirely on, depending on what end of the political spectrum you're on, you call it austerity or fiscal consolidation. And from there, we've had this lengthy conversation about Brexit, and now it's COVID-19. And it does feel like there's so many other issues which haven't really ever seen the light of day for over a decade now, which probably do need doing, which do need reform, which we've not been able to focus on. And I think that is a really fair point.
Yeah, I mean, for me, things like Brexit and climate change actually at the moment are huge issues and quite big threats. And Brexit, particularly when you think that the date's looming quite quick, coming upon us quite quickly and quite rapidly, is that we could land up with a very hard Brexit because no one's paid any attention to it realistically. I mean, it just seems to have gone out of the news. Any discussions that have been taken out haven't been really sort of reported or recorded because the media's been so focused on COVID-19 and politically as well. It's about the economy here and now. And I just think that we could land up with a double whammy. We could still be sort of dealing with COVID-19, and we could have Brexit as well. And suddenly it's just there upon us. And the consequences of that, I think, are going to be immense. And it's going to be like something biting you on the bum again.
Yeah.
So it's
technical term there, Maria.
I just have this vision of something coming suddenly, and it's there, and it's like a hornet or a bee sting, like stings you, and you just you didn't
I'm
realise
very comfortable with your bottom analogy. That's fine.
So next, and tell me if probably this doesn't need to be in here, but this was certainly a comment that was made that town centres require strong lobbying, which I think is certainly true, is an important statement, but is it really something we can class as either an opportunity or a threat?
it feels like I'm not sure that it comes under where it sits in this politically, but I think if you're talking in with this lens on it politically, I'm not sure it's about lobbying, but from a political standpoint, town centres and city centres will need that lobbying and will need to be put front and centre, because they are going to be some of the areas hardest hit, and especially in the bigger cities, where the sort of, because they're so compact and because of the struggle for social distancing, if it's not front and center in the discussions and on the political agenda, then we could see real damage to town centres, city centres, and therefore the wider economy. And therefore it needs to be a real political issue.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think, Maria?
I think it's quite interesting because, you know, the whole economy is suffering with this. But one thing this has done is it has actually raised the profile of town centres as economic hubs. So in a way, COVID-19 has been, if you want, in a way positive, an opportunity for town centres, because it's actually made people realise how important they are for both the social and the economic well-being of local communities, and also the impact of losing so many services, or so many services shutting down so quickly, I think has been measured. So there's the opportunity there, but I do agree that strong lobbying, and there is it should be there within the political point of view. And now, I mean, from the discussions we've had with our local LEP, is that the town centres and the way that towns, they are under no doubt, town centres will change. So there will be some lobbying required for actually what will our town centres look like in the future? How are they going to be supported? And what's employment and residential use going to look like as well? So I think there will be some political understanding required, and I don't think they can be dealt with in isolation as a business either, as sort of business centres. So opportunities, and I think there are some. I think there's more opportunities than threats for town centres when it comes to the political side. So yeah, I would say that. It's my.
Okay, so what I'm going to say is I have actually got a point in here coming up regarding where town centres sit on the political agenda, and the fact that they've moved up, which I sense is going to go down as an opportunity. So in that case, I think this particular statement about town centres requiring lobbying, I agree it needs to fit in here somewhere, but it's not necessarily an opportunity or threat. And probably other points have been covered elsewhere. So I'm going to put that down as neither. We've also got the comment that we don't necessarily always need answers or expect answers as an industry, but we do need leadership. Again, is that a statement which, while important, isn't something we necessarily classify as an opportunity or a threat?
Yeah, I think it's important, but I don't think it's a threat or as such an opportunity. It should be what the ATCM and others are doing as their sort of core function.
I think it's also probably incorporated within some of the other points as well, some of that around leadership. So, you know, when you're looking at political collaboration at all levels, that's where actually the role of ATCM, etc. is not just about the P with the capital P, but it's about other organisations that demonstrate leadership. So for me, the same as the elected officials keen to engage, some of that comes to me under political collaboration, both, you know, if you look at that on the broad spectrum, going from the local to the national level, I think it can be incorporated there.
Yeah, agreed. Next, elected officials being keen to engage. And I think this is something which we've heard back from a lot of members across the network. They've just had their MPs, councillors, MSPs, whoever it might be, who have just been far more open to talking about their issues than they've ever had before. I think I know which way this is going, opportunity or threat?
My concern is that this is a classic sort of by elected officials. Are you talking MPs or local officers of local authorities and the councillors there? Because I think they're different things. My frustration is that when there's something like this, suddenly MPs are there to engage with us and be seen and want to sort of do that bit, and it's very suddenly they're turning up to all the things that they haven't done for the last 5-10 years. For me, it's a frustration that it seems quite cynical. And that's where I'm going. And my fear is that they're here while it suits a political purpose, and then it will revert to the same format as it has done, where it's they're only there if something's either going extremely wrong or extremely well. Which, if it's wrong, they just want to pretend that they're doing something about it, and if it's exceedingly well, then it's clearly all down to them. So there's a certain cynicism in me from this, especially at that sort of level. I have good relationships with them and have done, but it's not as engaging as it should be.
Okay. Now that's interesting. So now I don't know how to classify that. I think Maria, what do you think about this?
Personally, I would remove it, because I think that if you've got any elected official keen to engage, then that's about political collaboration, because they should be working with other members or other elected officials within the organisation, whether it's an MP, whether it's an elected member, etc. Elected, there is an element of cynicism which can be a sort of put in there. I've not noticed, to be honest, any particular change, but that's because our elected members locally are pretty well engaged anyway with any process, but they're keen to look at their local communities. So we don't have that, but I do know, I've worked in other local authorities, and I can, when listening to Stefan's comments, it reflects perfectly other local authorities that I've worked in. So I think it shouldn't be there. If you were to be honest, elected officials keen to engage, it should be just part of the normal work. It should be part of political collaboration at all levels if they want to do that. And it then becomes a threat and opportunity within that political collaboration locally at a local level.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove it on the basis that we think it might be duplication with political collaboration. Would it be fair to say then that if it's not normally the case that elected officials are collaborative enough with the industry, that it is, the way we see it is, it's almost like an opportunity with a caveat. It is an opportunity now while this crisis lasts, because it means for now we do get to engage more than we would otherwise do. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think the opportunity here is to try and seek or push at a national level for engagement with the sort of political MPs at a local level, that they're more engaged with business improvement districts or city centre management, full stop, and to get a commitment out of them to say that they will engage in X number of meetings over a year, to ensure that is not something that drops off the agenda once this pandemic or issue has been resolved. So get some sort of commitment from central government that 2-3 times, even quarterly, over a year, the MPs that are covered in those areas will commit to taking part in roundtable discussions with BIDs, city centre managers, like the place managers, so that we get that engagement going forward. It's something that that should be an opportunity for us.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to move on to the final slide for political. So here we go. High streets elevated in the political agenda. Maria, opportunity or threat?
I think it's an opportunity, quite a strong opportunity, and I think we've seen it now. And I think we will see things change, both in the way that people politically, the politicians look at the high street because of the pressure, social pressures and the economic pressures, but also on a regional level, I think we'll see changes. When even on a regional level, it looks like some of the LEPs are moving away from things like housing numbers to job creation, and some of those they'll be looking about the way how high streets are integrated within that job creation as well. So I think that there will be quite some fundamental changes, but whether or not we see things like the longer term things happening, like business rates, reviews of business rates, because I think there'll be other agendas that will come in. I don't know, but I think it's an opportunity for the high street.
I'm just going to make a note of that comment around LEPs because I think that's a really good one.
Yeah, we again, I don't think LEPs understand bids and how they engage with them. From a local level, we've got a very well-respected LEP, and we've tried to engage with it in lots of different ways, and we're slowly building those bridges, but it's been far too slow and too arduous a process. I think they get chambers. They like chambers of commerce because it's sort of there should be a very logical thing. But yeah, high streets, elevated in political agenda, opportunity, tick.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, just on behalf of some LEPs, there are some LEPs out there that get it, but from what I get from our membership is it isn't many. It isn't many.
Yeah, I would say in Hertfordshire they do get it. I mean, we have with the council, so the BID and the council have monthly meetings with the LEP and plus quarterly updates and catch up. So we're and the discussions with them is that they now recognise that town centres, across Herts will change because of this, and the way that they're used will change. So I think it does vary across the country, the way that the LEPs operate.
I think there's a real opportunity here from a central perspective that government should and we should be pushing government to put like bids as a key part of the LEP agenda.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that the number of bids around the country, and I think what the LEPs don't get or don't understand is actually the number of bids in a particular area that a LEP may actually cover. But also what we did was we identified the number of businesses that each of those bids represented. So if you took the quantitative number of businesses that actually the bids represent and work with compared with other sectors, it's actually it's significant. I think it's when you start playing that numbers game with the LEPs, and then you look at GDPR, you look at employment, you then look at the range of employment, you then start to get a better picture, but also it gives you the foundations for a discussion, because actually it puts you in line with other sectors and they start to get it.
I think it should be embedded in their mandate that they have to, the bid should be a statutory consultee in their process, especially at the moment when we're seeing that our stock is of a certain level. I think now is the chance to challenge that process and say they should be represented within the LEP format.
I would agree with that.
That sounds great. What I'm going to say is hold fire. That sounds like actionable strategy to me. So I think I'm going to make a note of that, because I think that's going to come into phase 3. I think that is a fair idea.
Yeah,
I would agree with that, and
that's a typical pragmatic bid function, isn't it? Where they just keep solutions driven. OJ, stop all this sort of
strategy stuff.
Yeah, stop all the strategic approach. Get that done. Strategy comes as part with intrinsically wrapped with what is the outcome we want from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Next, pressure for governments to support businesses, especially high street businesses, where the damage to those businesses is so visible. Is this an opportunity or a threat?
I think so, Maria. I'll just go that it's technically both, because the opportunity is we should be seen to be pushing for this and supporting our businesses and leading the way so that governments can understand the needs and the requirements of the business. It's a threat that if we don't do it and we're not seen to do that for our businesses, that that we're therefore failing them and inherently not doing what we're supposed to deliver.
And what do you think, Maria?
I would go with that, but I also, I think that there's, I think one of the threats is that there's going to be pressure on the government to support all sectors, and it's where they deem to be the priority. And this has always been the issue, and this going back to the let point, is that high streets and town centres have never been a priority. They're never seen as a priority for the type of employment, the skills level, etc. So one of the discussions that we've always had with the LEP is that there's an undervaluation and undervaluing of the skills level within town centres, and I think that's probably one of the things that we have to also push on is actually, governments and LEPs, etc., see the town centres as service sector predominantly. They see them as low skilled and low paid workers, and that when you're looking politically and you're looking at support for businesses, they're going to be looking at actually what's the higher return for our investment. And in some cases, some town centres will actually suffer. So there is a threat over this because the government will start to actually say, well, actually, where are we going to get the greater return? Where's the highest economic benefit? And sometimes they'll look at the economics over the social as well. Plus, they don't understand the type of skill set required within certain businesses, and they don't understand the nature of businesses.
That is a really important point I've not considered. You know what? This is turning into a really valuable exercise, I think, in consultation. That is a really important point I've not considered. So I'll definitely take that forward. I just thought that would go down as an opportunity, no questions asked. But you're absolutely right. I think given the quality of the conversation, there's no way we're going to get through all of these. So we'll probably finish off with economy, and then I'll have to run this process again at another point in time where we finish off with social and technological. So just to crack on quickly, opportunity or threat, at some point we are going to have to lose the furlough scheme because the government is going to want to ease people back into work. And we obviously had a big announcement on this week already. Opportunity or threat of the phasing out of the furlough scheme. Maria, what do you think?
I actually think it rests in both, because at the moment you may have some businesses where sort of when you look at the costs, furloughing staff and actually closing down, not opening a company, may actually be economically more viable until there's more confidence sort of socially. Whereas I think the phasing of the furlough scheme will be a threat, I think, to things like the nighttime economy, the tourism sector, events, the creative sector, cultural sector, so I think there's going to be a risk to a lot of those sectors, but it may actually, in a way, it may be an opportunity, because it may actually then make some businesses look at the way they operate, be a bit more imaginative, and open up services that may otherwise be cut. But I think it could be an issue around employment as well. I think there may be a rise in unemployment when that happens.
I agree as well, Maria. I think the challenge, potential, the threat is that without the furlough scheme, then we may see redundancies hit. But then the question is that what would happen, and the furlough is just covering over that point to a degree and rising the debt that we're incurring as part of it. The opportunity is the innovation that comes out of bringing those people back and challenging the processes within organisations and looking at the opportunities. I think that one's a classic double-edged sword.
Yeah, I do as well.
Yeah, I think I've got something actually on business innovation which I think either comes up in this section or comes up in the section on technology. But I definitely haven't considered actually that the fact that the phasing out of the furloughing scheme will probably impact different sectors differently. And I think, Maria, that comment about hospitality and leisure, culture, things like that being hardest hit might be right, because ultimately you'd expect those sectors will be some of the last to reopen properly again, wouldn't they? They'll be some of the last to see income coming back in. So obviously, if you phase out the furlough scheme too early for those sectors, there will be staff that will be made redundant.
I mean, the thing is, if you take theatres, at the moment you've got the ability to furlough staff, but you still have the running costs of the building, so you're still doing basic maintenance, etc. But the likelihood of you being able to use that theatre, or is for when? Next year, probably. I've got a friend who's a director at an orchestra, a big orchestra, a national orchestra, and they don't think that they'll be back until 2021. And so, but the furlough scheme will run till October. And what happens to those staff then? What happens to musicians? What happens to, a lot of them will be predominantly maybe self-employed. Some might be under contract, depending on the nature of the sector. But there are lots of individuals, particularly in the creative area, events, music, production, film. What happens to those? Most are self-employed, but there are some that will be employed within companies. And tourism attractions will be the same.
Yeah, and Stefan, I think I know where the next one's going. Sharp rise in unemployment and the knock-on impact in terms of discretionary spend.
Yeah, that's just a threat all the way around, isn't it? The rise in unemployment has a huge impact on like the spending of individuals, has an impact on the economy, that we're having to cover that from central government. Obviously, there's also health and well-being implications for everyone coming out of that. So it's just a threat across across all sectors. That's a threat, but with our specific sort of lens on it, if you're thinking from the high street, that's a real consequence of a huge threat to the viability of city centres.
Yeah, I agree.
I think for one thing that as well is that the sharp rise in unemployment is likely to come, I think, initially from things like the nighttime, early evening hospitality sector, cultural sector. But that's also where the secondary spend tends to go if you're in employment. So you will buy and you'll pay for you'll buy essentials, but you're on a double-edged sword. If you're in the hospitality, or if you're in tourism, or if you're in culture or entertainment, you're actually going to be hit with a double whammy. So initially you don't know when you're going to be opening up, and then by the time you are actually able to open up, the spend nationally will be so low is actually you're going to see then unemployment, or you're going to see the lack of spend going into those secondary ones, because everybody's going to be concerned about the paying for the primary spend. So you actually are going to lose far more of that sector than you may initially think. So the ability to open up and then the consumer spend then going into it is going to lower. So I think they're going to be hit with a double whammy there.
I think there's just a challenge on the full viability of those organisations, full stop, as to how you can make them economically viable while socially distancing. And that's the challenge for lots of those bars, nightclubs, theatres, cinemas, all of those. The WHO recommendations, the existing regulations on fire and health and everything else are 1 metre squared per person. And the WHO recommendations are now 2.5 meters squared per person. So just the physical capabilities of, and I've talked to colleagues of mine in the industry who are saying, I need to get 950 people into my small business to be able to cover the costs for opening and staff costs. How am I going to get 950 people into a venue that's only 20 metres squared, which you could before because you would churn and you would get people through. Now, if you're having to half, quarter, put an eighth of the number in, it's just not viable. So there's a big that rise in unemployment may be even more than we anticipate based in the what comes out of the sort of implementation of risk assessments.
Yeah, I think the other thing as well is that you might find is that actually some cities, believe it or not, might be hit harder than some, say, market towns because of people's lack of desire to travel to those cities, because they might feel more vulnerable in a city than they may do in a town. So you might actually see the decline in city breaks. So over sort of market towns and coastal areas, people won't have that feeling of safety. But also the spend. So if you've got safety and spend as well, and you put those two together, the cities actually might be slightly harder hit. And London, who knows what will happen with London, and their dependence on both international and internal business as a destination.
Yeah, agreed. And finally, I think because we're out of time, we're going to just finish off with this last point: permanent scarring for local economies. Now, I don't even know if this should necessarily go down as an opportunity or a threat. It is an important statement, but do we actually need to include it?
My personal view is, sorry, Stefan, is that it will. The picture that we had 4 months ago will never be the picture that we will see in the future. So if you're saying permanent scarring for local economies, things will be different. It will be very different. Whether it will be a permanent scar, the same could have been said about 2008. So I think it's about change. So I think things will be very different, and things will be very difficult for a lot of people, if not impossible. But I think it will just be different, not necessarily permanent scarring. I think societies adapt rather than remain permanently scarred, unless we see complete decimation, total death, destruction, and then yes, you might actually say permanent scarring. I think it's different.
Yeah. What do you think, Stefan? That sounds to me like I might be getting rid of this one.
Yeah, well, I think it's the permanency element of it. I think we've seen that when you're even looking back at some of the issues that came out of previous like pandemic outbreaks like cholera and other stuff in previous times, actually city centres and local economies completely rebuilt themselves after that, knocked down huge elements of it and rebuilt themselves and repurposed themselves. So I think there will be scarring, and it will be how long that scarring is before the sort of shoots of recovery come through. But I think there will be different sort of innovation and different moves, and we might see a moving. And I think there will be almost a split between big urban cities and smaller secondary sort of like regional cities, and then sort of towns and stuff like that. That there will become one of the interesting bits will be if you don't have to work out of a main office and you don't have to go into Canary Wharf, just as an example, because you don't need to, you prove that you can work from home X amount of time. Therefore, would you not want to work in a more rural space, or a space where you've got much more function, come into the cities to do a bit of an occasional work and then step out? So I think there'll be a changing and a tidal shift in how we work, and I think that's not necessarily a scar. That's just repurposing how the economy will be built.
Yeah, agreed. I think so. What I'm going to do is, I mean, it's not necessarily an opportunity or a threat, is it? But it is an important point. It is about change. Brilliant. Thanks a lot, guys. I think we've run out of time. I'm going to bring this screen back. So that was fantastic. That was really useful. I have to admit, there's a lot of detail that's gone into that, which I wasn't sure if I was going to get, but it's been a really useful process. So I probably might need to run this again with others, maybe another couple of sessions just to get through all of these particular issues and get that same level of detail for everything. But I think it's really starting to shape up now. I can see lots of ideas coming from this in terms of things we will need to focus on, which I think it will be great if we get the advisory council to really push forward on behalf of ATCM. And certainly in terms of a policy remit nationally for town centres, I do see things starting to shape up. So Maria, Stefan, thank you very much. I hope you have a great day, and I shall speak to you both soon.
No,
okay.
thank you very much, Ojay.
Cheers,
Thank
guys.
you, and take care, both of you. Okay, off we go.